Okay, so what does it actually look like when a White House wages a foreign war, brokers a major deal with big tech, and issues new domestic orders, all in a single week? Well, we're about to find out because we're going straight to the source, the official documents themselves.
Yeah, you heard that right. This past week, the White House released this flurry of communications covering everything from a full-blown military conflict to a landmark agreement with AI giants and new executive actions on homeland security. We're going to unpack what they said and what it all seems to be pointing to.
First up, the administration announced a major military offensive against Iran. And they were really careful about curating the public narrative, releasing unclassified images of the operation as it was happening. Then, switching gears completely, the focus turned to domestic policy. The White House brought some of the world's most powerful tech companies to the table for a voluntary but pretty significant new pledge.
So let's break down how the administration is framing these huge events in their own words. The story they want to tell starts with what they describe as a long simmering conflict with Iran. So the first major problem of the week, as laid out in these White House documents, is a direct confrontation with Iran, with a laser focus on its nuclear ambitions. And to justify its actions, the White House doesn't point to just one thing. No, they lay out a 47-year history of what they call Iranian aggression. This whole narrative builds to a key claim, that Iran's recent moves to rebuild its nuclear program are an imminent threat. You see that phrase again and again in these documents. And just to make sure that point really lands, the White House even released a whole compilation of the president's statements on this. This isn't a new idea. In fact, they point out this exact position has been stated publicly over 74 times. You can really see the messaging strategy at work here. So you've got the problem framed as an imminent nuclear threat from a hostile nation. What was the administration's solution? Well, it was a massive military campaign, and they gave it a pretty dramatic name, Operation Epic Fury. Now, the words they use to describe it are very deliberate. The White House called it a precise, overwhelming military campaign. Precise and overwhelming. Those words are absolutely chosen to project both control and just sheer dominance.
And the goals they laid out? Incredibly ambitious. We're not talking about just delaying the nuclear threat, but to eliminate it, to destroy missile arsenals, and to dismantle what they call proxy terror networks all across the region. And in the days that followed, the White House put out update after update, claiming total success. Their document said Iran's leadership was dead or missing, its nuclear facilities obliterated. And get this, they even highlighted this wild historical detail, the first sinking of an enemy ship by a torpedo since World War II. To really hammer this success story home, the administration didn't just rely on its own statements. Oh no. It put together and published a whole document full of praise from officials and commentators, packaging the entire thing under that classic political slogan, peace through strength. Okay, so while Operation Epic Fury was dominating the foreign policy headlines, the White House was also tackling this huge domestic challenge, bubbling up in the tech world, the absolutely massive energy demands of the AI boom. So here's the problem. As the White House lays it out, this AI revolution needs a ton of new data centers. And these things are just incredibly power hungry. The big question is, who's going to pay for the grid upgrades to handle all that? And they argue that without some kind of intervention, it could be average American families who see their electricity bills just skyrocket. Now, what's really interesting here is that the administration's solution wasn't a new law or some regulation that would have to go through Congress. Nope. Instead, they went for a voluntary agreement. They brokered directly with the tech industry, and they called it the Ratepayer Protection Pledge. So the White House got a who's who of big tech. We're talking Google, Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, all in one room to publicly sign on. And the core promise of this pledge is, on its face, really simple. The tech companies, not you, will pay the massive energy costs that come with their own expansion. But it actually goes way beyond just paying the bills. The pledge is broken down into 4 key commitments. They're not just agreeing to pay for infrastructure, they're also promising to build new power sources, invest in the local communities where they set up shop, and ultimately help strengthen the entire grid. And the week wasn't over yet. The agenda, as laid out in these documents, also included 2 new executive actions aimed at what the administration was broadly calling homeland security threats. So the first was an executive order. That's a direct command to federal agencies, and it targeted cyber-enabled financial fraud. The second was a proclamation,
which is a more formal statement of policy, aimed at dismantling criminal cartels, and it used some really strong language, like demolish to the fullest extent possible. This cybercrime order gets really specific about what it's going after. A White House fact sheet lists out these predatory schemes, things like ransomware, phishing scams, sextortion, and it frames them as a direct threat to American families, saying these schemes are draining their life savings. Then, to kind of wrap up the week, the White House strategically amplified commentary that backed up their narrative. For instance, they highlighted this quote from commentator Mark Thiessen, which frames the president's actions not just as policy wins, but as these world-reshaping, historically important moves, putting him on par with presidents like Reagan and FDR. So, when you step back and you look at all the documents from just this one week, a really clear picture starts to form. A huge military campaign, a landmark deal with big tech, new domestic orders, all of it framed under this banner of peace through strength. The story from the White House is one of decisive, powerful action. But the deeper question, the one these documents can't answer, is what are the real-world consequences of all this going to be for all of us?